Zach was driving down the highway, making the 6-hour drive home from college for the summer. He had just finished his third year, and although he was glad that classes and exams were behind him, he was not looking forward to living under his parents' roof during the summer. In college, he could do whatever he wanted, party, stay out all night, get rowdy, get drunk, do whatever he wanted at any time. At home, he had to control himself. Otherwise, he would have received a lot of reproaches from mom and dad. Zach was a good-looking guy, tall, blonde, athletic, and popular at school. He was studying to be a journalist, had a good GPA, contributed to the university newspaper and radio station, and was the team's starting third baseman. Returning home only limited his options. Now he was looking forward to 3 months of doing the same thing he'd done the past 2 summers, working nights in a busy warehouse and helping coach his little brother's baseball team. His brother Jeff played in the county senior league. The team was coached by Dan, the father of Danny Jr., Jeff's best friend, who lived 3 houses away. Dan was an easygoing guy in his early 30s who worked for the State Highway Commission and had coached both boys since they were in the Little League. His wife, Barb, was a full-time team mom and a hairdresser by trade. Zach remembered the times when all the neighborhood kids would line up at her kitchen door for free haircuts when she held her periodic Saturday haircuts. Zach always liked Dan and Barb. They were kind, simple people, if a bit of an odd couple. They were complete opposites. Dan was a quiet, mild-mannered pipe smoker, a little rough around the edges with a simple face and potbelly. He rarely spoke unless he drank too much. Barb, on the other hand, was an attractive blonde with voluminous curls, a cheerful personality and wit, plus she had an amazing body that she kept in great shape. Zach always thought she was very sexy. Damn, everyone thought so. Zach parked the car in the driveway. There was no one at home. It was early afternoon, so Jeff was still at school and his parents were at work. His mother Meg worked as a nurse practitioner, and his father Joe was a civil engineer. He entered the house, unpacked the overflowing car, and moved all his belongings into his old bedroom. He threw the dirty laundry into the washing machine, and then went out into the yard and dived into the pool. He swam for a few laps before getting out and lying down on the sun lounger. He was proud of the backyard. He thought his parents did a great job with his design, from the large deck to the outdoor kitchen and bar, the pool with covered jacuzzi, even the gazebo. They loved to throw parties and often had friends and family over. Jeff came home from school and walked into the house, yelling at Zach because he saw his car in the street. Zach was in the laundry room downstairs. He put clean clothes in the dryer and threw another dirty load into the washing machine. They greeted each other and then went into the yard to play ball. They talked about the baseball team and how it was going. The season started a couple of weeks ago. Jeff said the team looked good, winning 3 games and losing 1 in extra innings. "We should have won," Jeff said, but our right outfielder missed a routine pop fly, and by the time he caught the ball, the batter had already rounded third base and was heading home. Lost 3-2. "Oh, that's hard," Zach said. "It's easier to forget defeats than such offensive losses." "We need you to coach," Jeff said. "Mr. Deng just sits most of the time and doesn't say much. We need you to coach third base and get us going." "I'll call Mr. Dan tonight and tell him I'm back. If he wants me there, I'll come." "Oh, he wants you, of course. Danny told me he mentioned it many times." Their mother left the house. "Here is my baby," she screamed, rushing to hug Zach. Meg hugged her eldest son tightly and kissed his cheeks. "Oh, it's so good to see you, honey. Welcome home," she said. "How are you traveling?" "No problem," Zach said. "Fine. I'm making lasagna for dinner, so I hope you're hungry." "I'll eat everything, don't worry." Meg stepped back and looked at him. "Oh my God, you need a haircut ASAP," she said, looking at him. "You need to go see Mrs. Barb." Zach knew she was right. He hasn't had his hair cut since Christmas. "Ma," Jeff whined from 20 meters away. "We're trying to play ball." "Yeah, I know," Zach said. "I'll call and make an appointment." "Glad you're home, Zach," she said. Meg went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. The boys finished playing ball. Zach called Dan after dinner. "I was hoping you'd be back before the weekend," Dan said. "I need you. We seem to be looking good, but we need training on the basics. It is scheduled for Saturday morning. This is where you are needed." "Oh, what are the basics?" Zach asked. "Right-handed outfielders catching balls." "Oh, Jeff told you how we lost, right? Maybe that too. But mostly bunting, running around the bases, rundowns, stretches. Everything is fun. And kids seem more focused when a real college student is talking to them, rather than the same dad they've been listening to for 6 or 7 years." "Okay, sounds like a plan. I'm looking forward to starting. Oh, and Miss Barb is nearby. Tell her I urgently need a haircut and I'll make an appointment." "I will tell her. See you on Saturday," Dan said. Zach hung up and called the salon. The girl who answered the phone said Barb would be working the next day. He made an appointment for the middle of the day. The first thing Zach did the next morning was call his employer. He worked there for 3 summers in a row, and they were always glad to have him back. He was told to come and sign all the papers, and he would start next Monday. Zach took a shower and washed his golden locks. He dressed casually but neatly and went to fill out paperwork for work. Then he had lunch and went to the bookstore, where he bought a couple of books. He read and wandered around for a bit until it was time for his appointment at the barber shop. He arrived at the salon a little early and checked in. He sat down so that he had a good view of Barb. She had worked at this place for many years, so she had a workstation towards the back of the salon, and she had an old man sitting in her chair. She looked beautiful, as always, a slender body in a black zip-up with elbow-length sleeves, black leggings, and black shoes. Her blonde curls danced on her shoulders as she moved back and forth, trimming. He always enjoyed going to Barb for his haircut. She looked good, smelled good, and spent a lot of time taking care of every little detail, making adjustments here and there to make sure everything looked perfect. Another thing that Zach liked about Barb was that she wore very little makeup, just a little accent around her eye and nail polish. But with jewelry, everything was different. She always wore a lot of jewelry, from head to toe necklaces, rings, bracelets, earrings, you name it. Even sitting on the chair in the waiting area, he could see gold chains hanging from her earlobes, bracelets and bling on her wrists, rings on most of her fingers, and bracelets on her ankles. He wondered how much more he could not see. Finally, Barb took the sheet off the old man, and he rose from his chair. He presented himself a little in the mirror before they walked up to the cash register. He paid, thanked him, and walked past Zach on his way out the door. "Okay, who's next?" Barb asked loudly, pretending to look at the schedule on the counter. "Do we have Zach?" She looked at him and smiled. Zach stood up and walked over to her, and Barb walked around the counter and hugged him. "Hi, Zach. Welcome home," she said. "You look fine. How are you?" "Okay, what about you?" "Okay, let's go back," she said. Zach sat down and Barb covered him and wrapped paper tape around his collar. Barb smelled nice, just as he remembered, like fresh flowers. While she was preparing her instruments, they exchanged pleasantries. How was school? How was family? All that. Then Barb turned to him and was ready to begin. She tilted her head and looked at him for a moment, lifting his hair and letting it fall back. "Zach, I have to say, you have certainly become a handsome young man," she said. "But damn, boy, you need a haircut ASAP." I know," he said sheepishly. "That's why I'm here. Do your magic." "Magic. I might need a trimmer for this mess." She ran her fingers through his hair on both sides of his head. "How do you want your hair cut?" "As usual. If you remember." "How can I forget such a head?" she said. Barb started with electric clippers on her sides, repeating, "Oh my God, you need a haircut," repeatedly. "How is your mother? I haven't talked to her for a long time." "She's okay, said to say hi," he said. "Are you coming to her girls' night out this year? She'll be here in 3 weeks." "Oh, sure, it's always fun. All the girls are looking forward to it. Every year on the Saturday after Memorial Day, Meg held her girls' pool party. She invited all her friends, colleagues, and neighbors. The party started in the middle of the day, and no men were allowed in until sunset, by which time most of the women were already slightly tipsy. Then the almost crazy party began. "Oh, okay," Zach said. "I will definitely come and look at the landscape. I hope you wear that skimpy swimsuit you wore last year." "Oh no, I don't think so, but I have another one you might like." "This is good. You must show off your hot body. Don't hide behind that black robe. It's hard to visualize what's underneath." "I'm working, Zach. Besides, you don't have to visualize what I have underneath. You should be looking in the mirror, not at the hairdresser's butt." He looked in the mirror in front of him. Barb stopped for a second and looked straight into his eyes through the mirror with a playful smile on her face. Then she returned to work. They didn't speak for a long time. Zach closed his eyes as Barb's scissors danced around his forehead. A picture of her tanned, toned, almost naked body in her modest swimsuit arose in his thoughts. He opened his eyes and through the mirror looked at her skillful hands, with rings on 7 fingers, flashing back and forth as she wielded scissors, accompanied by the ringing rattle of numerous bracelets and trinkets on both wrists. In the mirror, Zach watched as the hair on his head gradually took shape. He wanted it to last longer. He loved the feeling of Barb so close, taking care of him, the feel of her fingers on his scalp, the light pressure of her palms on his neck as she applied the hot towel. But in the end, she took the cover off him. "Here," she said, "everything is ready, another masterpiece." "Looks great, Barb. You are a real hair-cutting master. See you in a year or two," she laughed. "No, I'll be back earlier," he said, getting up. "I'll come to you even if I don't need a haircut." They went to the cash register to pay. Zach handed her several bills, including a large tip, and told her he didn't want change. "Oh, Zach, wait, that's too much," Barb said. "No, not too much," he said. "Getting a haircut with a trimmer pays well." He leaned closer and quietly added, "Spend the extra money on the skimpiest swimsuit you can find." Barb's lips curled into a flirtatious smile. "Well, thanks, Zach. Maybe I'll do that," she said and winked at him. The next morning was Saturday, so Zach went to baseball practice and tried to pull the boys up. He was glad to see that they weren't that bad, just a little rusty on some of the boring niceties. The training was boring for the children, but by the end, they were all actively working and cooperating well. On Monday evening, he began his work. He knew the matter well, as he had done it last summer. He liked the night shift because of the difference in pay, and it was much calmer and less hectic than the day or evening shifts. There were no trucks coming and going, no loading and unloading. He just had to fill, pack, and fold orders for the day's workers to ship in the morning. They had a game on Tuesday night. He hoped Barb would be in the stands, as she often was, but she wasn't. He knew she worked a couple of evenings a week, so she was probably at work. This helped Zach focus on the game, which they won 6-5 when Jeff scored the game-winning run with a line drive to center in the bottom of the 7th inning. The next game was Thursday, and Barb was there. She sat in the top row of the temporary bleachers behind the third base bench. He noticed her and waved to her from the trainer's box, and she waved back. He took off his cap and ran his hand through his hair several times, pointed to his head, and raised a finger up. She smiled and made an okay gesture with her thumb and forefinger. She looked damn sexy in denim shorts and a floral top. Her hair was tied up, and she looked much younger than her early 30s. They both wore dark glasses, so it was difficult to tell if she saw him constantly looking at her during the game. She smiled at him several times as he looked at her, so Zach assumed she had noticed him. Then, in the bottom of the 6th inning, he looked up, and she was gone. Over the next 4 games, Barb came over a couple of times, but she usually came after the game started and left before it ended, so they never had time to talk and Zach had to be content with watching her from afar. Then they had a game against the team they were fighting for first place, and it was the same team they lost to earlier when their right outfielder missed the ball. Barb came in the 2nd inning and didn't leave early this time. The game was tense, with a duel between pitchers and a draw, and the score was tied until the bottom half of the seventh inning, the last inning under regulation. Danny Jr. opened the inning with a loose single and advanced to second base on a bad throw. Zach then signaled to bunt the next player, and Danny advanced to third base on a successful sacrifice bunt. Now, with one out, the game could be won with a fly out. Jeff came out to bat. On the second pitch, start running home as soon as the pitcher releases the ball, Zach whispered to Danny. Danny smiled and nodded enthusiastically. This was a technique that Zach and Jeff had already practiced. Zach signaled to his little brother not to throw out the first pitch. Curve on first strike. Then he gave him a sign on his bow, suicide squeeze. The pitcher swayed on the rubber and began throwing. Run, Zach said sharply as the pitcher released the ball and Danny took off. Jeff paused for a split second before getting into position for the bunt, which caught the fielders off guard. Danny ran home. It was an outside fastball, and Jeff hit it perfectly to right field between first base and the mound. The pitcher and first baseman rushed for the ball at the same time, getting in each other's way. The first baseman had the best angle and picked up the ball, but the ball slipped out of his hands, and he made a late throw to home. Danny slid and scored without a tag attempt. Game over, victory 1-0. The bench and stands erupted in screams. The team ran onto the field and surrounded Jeff and Danny as spectators streamed from the stands. Dan walked over and shook Zach's hand. Various parents and family members congratulated their boys. Barb hugged Danny Jr. A few minutes later, when things had calmed down a bit and the players were getting all their gear into their bags, Zach was standing off to the side by himself when Barb approached him. Yellow shorts, tan body, red top. God, she looks hot, he thought. She smiled at him, and he almost got excited. Good move, coach, she said. Quite risky, but it worked. Yeah, I knew they wouldn't expect a second bunt with a good hitter on the field. And Danny began. Teamwork pays off. And good coaching. It's probably due to the haircut, he said. Less hair interfering with my brainwaves. Well, you're modest. That's a worthy trait. You like to take risks, don't you? Depends on the reward, I guess. They were silent, looking at each other. Zach looked straight into her eyes, sparkling behind her sunglasses. So, Barb, he said, surprising himself by using her name. Ready for the ladies' first pool party? She's here in 3 days. Oh yes, I'm ready. It's always fun. Tell me, have you bought a bikini recently? Actually, yes, she said with a playful smile. This is good. I look forward to it. I hope the weather will be good. Me too, she said. It would be a shame if we were unlucky with the weather. She winked at him again. He looked at her back as she walked away. With her yellow shorts hugging her cute ass and her tight red top hugging her delicious breasts, she looked like a fresh piece of strawberry cheesecake ready for him to take a bite. The jewelry on her wrists and ankles sparkled in the setting sun as she walked to her car. Zach felt excited and knew it was time to take a risk to get the reward he had never had. Saturday arrived, and the weather was nice, sunny and warm with a few scattered clouds. Zach helped his mother prepare for the party, moving furniture, setting up tables, loading the bar, getting everything ready. He ran out to get a few bags of ice. Meg was busy eating. Dad was out golfing and Jeff was staying with a friend. Usually the plan was for Zach to help get the party started when the women arrived, serve drinks and towels, bartend, set up the music, and do whatever he could to help. Then, when the party got going, he would disappear and just make sure the music didn't stop. In keeping with the pool party vibe, Zach wore long, baggy swim trunks and nothing else. The first guests began to arrive around 2:30. The women seemed to arrive in groups of 3 or 4. Zach had seen most of them before, although he didn't remember many of the names except the moms from the neighborhood. He opened a can of beer and took a long sip. He kept his eyes on Barb and noticed her as soon as she walked onto the veranda. She was with a couple of other women from the neighborhood, and they all said hi to Meg and a few others nearby. Most of the women were already seated on chairs around the pool. A couple of minutes later, the newcomers approached the bar. Zach poured mimosas and punched into tall plastic glasses. He handed out the first few drinks pretty quickly. He served the last one to Barb and took his time while the others went to the pool. She looked great. She was wearing a baseball cap, sunglasses, and a shy smile. She had a lace cape that showed the outline of her bikini. She held a beach towel in her hand, chains around her neck and bracelets on her wrists. Zach served her a mimosa, and as she took the glass, he noticed that her fingernails were painted black, which he found to be a sexy contrast to the shiny rings on her fingers. "Thanks, Zach," Barb said. "So your mom made you bartend again?" "Yes, and I'll be here until I get you drunk." "Then I better control myself, huh?" She laughed. "No, drink as much as you want," he said. "When can I see what you have under that cape?" "Oh, not long to wait, and it won't disappoint you." He watched her leave. She was wearing flip-flops, and her toenails were also painted black. Zach continued pouring drinks as the last guests arrived. He watched Barb as she socialized around the pool and then found a chair next to some of her neighbors. She took off her cape and placed it on the back of the chair. She was right. He was not disappointed. He already knew how good her figure was, but the swimsuit emphasized her assets. It was painted and trimmed to highlight her slender, tan body. The swimsuit was creamy yellow with black spots and other patterns. It looked like leopard skin. The sun reflected off her jewelry until she dove into the pool. Zach went inside for more punch. "What does a girl have to do to get a drink here?" Zach leaned over the bar when he heard Barb's voice. He stood up and looked at her. She was alone. "Take off your clothes," Zach said. Barb laughed. "The bartenders here are very straightforward," she said. "Where should I complain?" "It's no use complaining. It's no use complaining, it won't help." He poured her a drink and walked out from behind the counter to stand next to her. "Here, jungle woman," he said, handing her a drink. "I love your swimsuit, it's amazing. What is this, a leopard?" "No, it's actually an ocelot." "Oh, well, either way, it's a wild cat," he said. Barb laughed and nearly spilled her drink. Her body shook with fits of laughter. Zach took a sip of his beer with a smug smile on his face. "I can't believe I'm laughing at this," she said, still laughing. "It was rude and corny, but it's funny. Bad jokes are my specialty. I've been here all week." They stood there for a moment, sipping their drinks and looking at each other. No one looked away. "Damn, you look great," Zach said. "Why don't we run away together?" "Sorry, I cannot. I have to go to work on Monday, and I can't live with the thought that I stole the boys' coach." Zach suddenly felt very close to Barb. He knew he wanted her. She was playful and flirty, and he liked that. But is she teasing him? "I never get tired of looking at you. You have an incredible body," he said. "Thank you. You've got a nice body too, Zach." She wanted to touch his chest, but stopped. "Maybe we should combine these bodies," he said, pressing himself closer to her. "Oh, I don't know about that," she said. "I may be a little old for you, and I don't think my husband will like this idea, and your mother won't appreciate me spoiling her boy and ruining her party." "Well, you're not too old for me. I just told you that I can't take my eyes off you. And Dan isn't here, and I definitely won't tell him. And about my mother, she's a little busy today. We could have sex 3 times, 3 different ways, in 3 different rooms in her house this afternoon, and she wouldn't notice." "I doubt it," she said. Barb shook her head and took a sip. Zach took her half-filled glass and topped it off, then handed it back to her. "Listen," Zach said quietly, leaning closer to her. "Go back to the pool, socialize, finish your drink. Meet me upstairs in 30 minutes, last door on the right." "You're crazy, Zach. You know that." Zach ran into the house to get some ice. Barb returned to the pool with a stunned look on her face. It was Zach's old room, but all the rock posters had been replaced with elaborate framed paintings. It was now a rarely used guest room. approximately 12 square meters with a double bed, bedside table, chest of drawers, and a small table and chair. Zach stood and waited. 31 minutes, 32, 33. Will she come? And then he heard quiet footsteps, bare feet along the wooden corridor. The door was slightly open, and he saw it open all the way, and there she was, this woman in a bikini, the hot wife from the next street. He closed the door behind her and locked it, then turned to face her. He touched her shoulders gently and slowly ran his fingers down her arms. He felt her shudder slightly. "This is crazy," Barb whispered. "I must have gone crazy." Zach intertwined his fingers with hers. "I want to kiss you," he said softly. He squeezed her hands and touched his lips to hers. Barb didn't hesitate for long. He broke the kiss for a moment, opened his arms, and hugged her. Zach carefully moved Barb back and sat her on the edge of the bed. Then they had sex. "God, Zach," she said. "Wow. You taste wonderful," he said. He stood up and lifted Barb up with him. He kissed her and walked out the door. Zach went to the bar and drank a beer. Barb went swimming. No one even noticed their absence, or at least no one said anything. Jeff's room was the same size as the guest room, but looked like a teenager's room. Music and sports posters on the walls, a computer on the table, shoes scattered on the floor. The single bed was not made, so Zach straightened it out as best he could. Barb tiptoed up the stairs and down the hallway and entered Jeff's bedroom. She locked the door behind her. She walked up to Zach with a scared look on her face. Zach hugged her and kissed her. Her lips immediately opened and let him in. Her hair was wet and smelled as clean as a swimming pool. They did not stand during the ceremony and immediately had sex. "That was so damn hot," Zach said and kissed her. He pulled on his swimming trunks. 30 minutes, Barb said. "Where?" "Downstairs," Zach said, "in the office." His father's office was right next to the cafeteria, but the door was always locked, so Zach knew it would be safe there. There was also a small sofa there, and he planned to put it to good use. He entered the room and left the door slightly open for Barb. The office was on the east side of the house, away from the evening sun, so it was quite dark. He walked to the window, and as he closed the blinds, felt two arms hug him from behind. She was already there, and he didn't notice her. Barb buried her face in his neck and kissed him. He turned to face her, and she raised a finger to his lips. "SHH," she said very softly. She turned and tiptoed to the door, closed it, and locked it. She returned to him, looked into his face, and raised her hand to run her fingers through his hair. He took her hand and brought it to his mouth, kissing each of her fingers. "Black nail polish," Zach said. "I've never seen you paint like that before." "Yes, well, I decided to try something new. It's a statement of sorts, I guess." "Statement? What does it say?" "It says I want you to take me," Barb said. "You're reading my mind again," Zach said. He held her tightly to him, their lips merged. When her trembling finally subsided, Zach unsaddled her as Barb stood up and began getting dressed. Zach pulled on his swim trunks. He took her in his arms and kissed her. "It was fucking incredible," he said. "You have sex like a goddess. I want us to do more of this." "You better," Barb said, tying the cape in the front. "Is the coast clear?" Zach opened the door and looked around. "Yes," he said. "All is clear." "Good." She kissed him powerfully. "You're a fucking asshole yourself," she said quietly. Zach watched as she walked through the living room and down the hallway, heading to the bathroom. They weren't caught. Everyone was outside, and the music was still playing. The sun is setting, and soon all the husbands and boyfriends will appear. Zach went upstairs to take a shower. Zach didn't stay long. He left the party because he didn't want to say or do anything stupid in front of Barb that would give them away, and he didn't think he could see her with Dan now. He went to an old hangout to drink some beer and play pool. He met a girl he knew, and they hung out for a while. He knew he could have gone home with her, but he didn't even try. He didn't want her. He wanted Barb. So now what? Zach soon discovered that having a secret affair with the hot mom living down the street wasn't so easy. He couldn't call her at home. She had a husband, a son, and a regular job. He couldn't bother her at work. They couldn't be seen. He even had to be careful when talking to her at ball games and check their body language. Otherwise, someone might notice something and become suspicious. It was strange for Barb, too. She didn't enjoy the rest of the pool party that night. Dan appears half-lit and continues drinking. She was just hanging out with the girls and trying to avoid talking to Meg as much as possible, as if Meg could read her face and know that she had been sucking and fucking her son at home that day. Zach went to the next game and tried to act normal. He didn't see Barb. He coached the same way he always had, but was shy and paranoid that others knew something they didn't. And it was strange to be around Dan, knowing that he would kill him if he found out that he had his wife. After the game, Zach returned to his car and found a small envelope in the driver's seat. His window was slightly open, and someone stuck him through the hole. Zach was neatly printed on the outside of the envelope in block letters. He got behind the wheel and opened it. It was short and sweet, but his heart began to pound. Come tomorrow morning when you finish work. Be careful. He drove home with a smile on his face. He read a book for a while, took a shower, and got ready for work. The next morning, Zach drove home and parked his car in front of the house as usual. Everyone has already left for today. He went to his room and took off his dirty clothes. He could still smell her faintly, almost taste her. He took a shower, dressed casually shorts and a t-shirt, and headed out. There was a right-of-way behind the backyards on their side of the street, and he used it to get down to Barb. He walked to the back door and knocked. "Come in," he heard Barb call from inside. Zach opened the door and walked in. The door led into the dining area adjacent to the living room. He saw Barb standing in the living room next to the couch, barefoot, with a knee-length pink robe tied around her. "I don't have to go to work before noon," she said. Zach quickly walked up to her. Barb unbuttoned her robe and dropped it. She was naked except for her jewelry. Hoops in her ears, necklaces, rings, bracelets and bracelets on her wrists and ankles, 2 gold chains wrapped around her thin waist. Their bodies instantly touched, and they kissed. Barb's hands went to Zach's shorts. "I can't believe it's only been 4 days," Barb croaked. "I know," Zach said. Zach's shorts were off and Barb was pulling his t-shirt over his head. Barb pulled him down on top of her. "Let's have sex first," she said. This sex was fast and furious. After the crazy sex, Barb went to the kitchen and brought them a glass of water. They sat and talked about how they planned their dates. They started kissing again, and soon they were having sex again. "You know, you ring when we have sex," Zach said. "What?" Barb asked, puzzled. "Your jewelry. They ring when we have sex." "Do not you like it?" she asked. "I like it, just an observation. It's like musical accompaniment." Barb shook her wrists. "It's not really a jingle," she said. "It's more like a ringing sound." She shook her left wrist, then her right. "Actually, these are 2 different sounds," she continued. She shook her right bracelet wrist. "It's a ringing sound. But listen to this." She shook her left wrist with trinkets. "It's more like a jingle." She shook both wrists together. "Ringing and clanking," they said at the same time. "I'll be happy to jingle and jingle with you any time," Zach said. "Just tell me when." Their romance was now in full swing. Her husband worked during the day and left home early. Junior Danny was at school for another week, but then would take sailing lessons 3 matinees a week, 2 of which were on days when Barb didn't have to go to work until noon. Their schedule worked out, and they rang and jingled 2 matinees a week. Barb said that if for some reason she had to cancel at the last minute, such as because her husband or son was sick, she would lower the blinds on the kitchen window, and that would be the signal for Zach not to come. Their sex could be gentle or rough, but it was fearless. Any idea was worth a try, and Barb loved the adventure. They have sex in every room, on tables, on the carpet, and against the wall. The summer was amazing for both of them. 2 mornings a week, Zach would return from work, go to Barb and watch her have sex for 2 or 3 hours, and then go home to bed. 2 mornings a week, Barb would wake up, see her husband and son off, and then have sex with Zach for 2 or 3 hours before work. 4 times they had to cancel meetings, which made them even hungrier for each other the next time. They were never caught, and no one seemed to suspect. Their last morning together was bittersweet. It was late August, the day before Zach headed back to college for his senior year. The sex was more gentle, slower, as if they wanted to savor it and say a long, sweet goodbye. Zach gave Barb a gift before leaving. It was a silver bracelet that was engraved with the words, "The Ring of the Gels." Tears fell down her cheeks, the first time she cried in front of him. She then went to her jewelry box and selected a thin silver chain, placing it around Zach's neck and kissing him goodbye. He said he would see her when he came home for Thanksgiving. Zach returned to college and began chasing co-eds again, but was looking forward to returning home for Thanksgiving. Not because of the turkey, but because of the jingle rings. But they didn't meet on Thanksgiving Day. Barb worked hard. She had a lot of work, relatives came, and Dan and the youngest Danny stayed at home. Zach took a chance and sent Barb a Christmas card. He sent her to her salon. In addition to wishing her a Merry Christmas, he told her that he was thinking about her and would like to see her when he was home for the holidays. She didn't answer, but he still couldn't get her out of his mind. He looked for her when he came home, but they did not meet. In January, after returning to college, he received a short letter from her. She thanked him for the card, but said she thought it was too risky to try to meet during the holidays, when everyone was home and there was a lot of work and family responsibilities. Summer was wonderful, but that was last summer. The last day of school was in mid-May. Because his family lived far away, Zach missed graduation, and the college had to mail him his diploma. He went home for a few days before returning to his apartment near college. He accepted a job offer at a media company where he interned during his senior year. His parents held a graduation party in their backyard, and of course, Barb and Dan were invited. He and Barb looked at each other for a while before they had the chance to talk privately. They exchanged awkward greetings before starting to flirt. "You're wearing the chain I gave you," Barb said, touching it on his neck. "I never took it off. Is it true? Is it true? So, Barb, do you want to meet in 30 minutes upstairs in the room at the end of the hallway?" She laughed. "Don't think. We managed to do it once, but this time we may not be so lucky." "Come on," Zach teased her. "I'm sure we can do this 3 times in 3 different rooms." I don't think so, lover. Everyone is here this time. Your father, your younger brother, my husband, my son. Plus, you are a man of honor, and they will definitely look for you. But thanks for the offer." A little later, Dan and the younger Danny went home to watch baseball on TV. Barb stayed at the party for a while, and then Zach walked her home. They made out a little in her backyard. "You look fucking incredible," he whispered. "Are you sure you don't want to run away with me?" "Oh, Zach, I often think about you." "I think about you too," she said. "I often watch videos with lipstick. It's so sexy. It always turns me on." "My fame," she said quietly. "I miss you," he said with a lump in his throat. They kissed goodbye for a long time. In the darkness, Zach felt the moisture on her cheeks. A couple of days later, Zach returned to his apartment. The following Monday, he started his new job. 2 weeks later, there was a ladies' pool party hosted by Meg. Barb wasn't enjoying it as much as she had last year, and honestly, she wanted to be somewhere else. The weather was cooler, cloudier, and there was no young, handsome bartender to seduce her. She drank her drinks, looked at the back of the house, and remembered that day last year when she jingled and jingled with Zach 3 times in 3 different rooms. Zach became very busy and quickly adapted to his new position. Since he interned at this company for 2 semesters, the transition was smooth. He worked hard for 5 days and then rested for 2. He already knew many of the people he worked with and occasionally interacted with some of them outside of work. He went home with one girl and almost had sex with her, but decided against it. He knew they weren't a good fit for each other, and that would only complicate their relationship at work. She understood this and even respected him for it. At first, Zach tried to call home once a week or so, but over time this habit disappeared as he became busy, so his mother called him to make sure he was still alive. Sunday evenings seemed to be the best time to talk on the phone. 4 months later, while talking to his mother, he learned the news. Barb and Dan are separated, Meg said. They are getting divorced. What? Zach said. Are you kidding? Why? What's happened? I don't know the whole story, she said. Just what Jeff learned from the younger Danny. But Dan and the younger Danny have moved and the house is up for sale. I called Barb, but she was depressed and didn't say much. I called a couple more times, but she didn't answer. It seems she was having an affair and got caught. Oh my God. With whom? I don't know, with some guy she met in the salon, I think. Things got pretty ugly when Dan found out. Lots of screaming and swearing. Dan took the younger Danny and left. Zach was stunned. He ended the call and called Barb. The call went to voicemail and he left a message. It was Sunday, around 8 in the evening, and he didn't expect her to call him back that evening, but she called an hour later. Oh, Zach, thanks for calling. It's nice to hear your voice. I talked to my mother. She said that they had separated and were selling the house. What's happened? Jesus, Zach, it was a nightmare. What did your mom say? Just what I said is that you are separated and are probably getting a divorce and selling the house. Is that all she said? She didn't know much, only what Jeff learned from the younger Danny. She said you were having an affair and Dan found out. Oh, she said. Well, not quite like that. Is it true? What really happened? He asked. You were the only one I had an affair with, Zach, she said, and Dan doesn't know about you. But he found a lipstick video. He saw my lips, my nose, and the rings on my fingers, and then he listened to the rest of the part and heard us moaning and having sex. Damn it. How did he find it? That's the point. He was rummaging through my phone. I thought I hid it. I almost deleted it so many times, but didn't. And he has no idea who it was. None. And it drives him crazy. But he doesn't need to know. It won't change anything because I did it and we're still breaking up. But it might upset a few more people. They talked and talked, gradually plunging into the comfort zone they had shared before. They talked about their flirting, their first meetings at his mother's house, her black nails, the blinds in the kitchen, lipstick, the clinking and clanking, the bracelet he gave her and the chain she gave him. It's still around my neck, he told her. Zach suddenly realized that they had been talking for 2 hours. Well, Barb, I have to tell you the purpose of my call, he said. I need a haircut. Barb laughed. Oh yeah? Up or down? The top needs to be trimmed. Below shave. Okay, she said. Are you going to come to the city soon? Not really, but I thought maybe we could meet somewhere in the middle. On weekends. Zach's voice shook slightly as he said this. He felt goosebumps on his forearms and a slight excitement. Is he in too much of a hurry? There was a pause. For the weekend, right? She said. This might not be a bad idea. Get away from here. I need a distraction. They chose a weekend in 2 weeks. This gave Barb time to change her schedule and get Saturday off. Before ending the conversation, they told each other how nice it would be to meet again. They called again 2 days later to confirm plans. Zach chose a place where they could meet and booked a hotel. Zach looked forward to the weekend like nothing else. He knew he wanted to jump on Barb as soon as he saw her. But what did she expect? She'd been through a lot lately, and he didn't want to cross the line and stress her out even more. But he thought it was a very good sign that she was willing to travel almost 3 hours to spend a couple of days with him. He went out and bought a bunch of metal and glass bracelets. Barb was looking forward to it too. She was in a state of guilty depression after the breakup, and Zach always cheered her up. It would be great to get out of the house because the realtors will be giving tours all weekend anyway. She had already decided that she would do without men for a while, but she may have changed her mind. The morning after Zach's call on Sunday, she called her doctor to start taking her pills again. The day has come. It was Friday, and they both managed to leave work early. Zach had booked a hotel room in a small town on the river, and their room had a balcony and a view. He filled the room with drinks and ice. Before leaving, he took out the bracelets he had bought and put them on his wrists. He undid an extra button on his shirt so Barb could see the change she had given him. There was an old log cabin restaurant next to the hotel, and it had the most original name, Log Cabin. There was a large wooden terrace overlooking the river, with tables, a long bar, and live music. It was there that they agreed to meet. It was a warm evening. As the sun set in the west, the terrace was in pleasant shade. Zach came early to relax and have a couple of cold beers, but Barb came earlier too. He was on his third sip of beer when she appeared. He saw her before she saw him, walking through the French doors onto the terrace. She smiled when she noticed him. She approached him. She looked great. Her hair was longer, flowing freely and carefree. She wore a cream summer dress that came a couple of inches above her knees, highlighting her slender, tanned figure and light sandals. And of course, jewelry, earrings, necklaces, rings, bracelets, and trinkets on the wrists and ankles. As she came closer, he saw that her nails and toes were painted black and her lips a deep red. They hugged. Zach squeezed her tightly. I inhaled her wonderful aroma. I felt the softness of her breasts, her breath on her neck. Her hands are on his back. They kissed, and her tongue slid into his mouth. Everything is back. You look amazing, Zach said. And you too, dear. And I love your jewelry, Barb said, laughing. It's a tribute, he said, shaking his wrists, ringing and clanking. She sat down next to him and ordered a gin and tonic. They sat on chairs facing each other, talked with their knees touching, and soon were holding hands. Their joint natural excitement was noticeable from the other side of the river. When their glasses were empty, Zach wanted to order another round, but Barb stopped him. Until what time are you open? She asked the bartender. The bar closes at 2, the kitchen at midnight. She turned to Zach and said, Let's come back later. She didn't need to say more. They walked hand in hand to her car and took her suitcase. They entered the room and kissed like long-lost lovers, which they were. She opened her bag and found lipstick. She took the brush and looked in the mirror to touch up her lips. Do you have a phone? She asked. Of course, here it is, Zach said, taking it out of his pocket. Great. Turn on the video camera. We will make another film. And this time you can show my full face if you want. She pulled the straps off her shoulders and her dress fell to the floor. She was wearing only 2 gold chains around her waist and thin panties that matched the color of her lips. She walked over to Zach and began to unbutton his shirt. That night, Zach's body was covered in lipstick again. It was some of the most passionate clanging they had ever had. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.